Since I started calisthenics training full-time just over 5 years ago, I've been able to hit almost every long-term goal I ever had in those first few years by developing 4 key principles. The thing is, during those years I felt like every week I was playing a choose-your-own-adventure game with calisthenics, but I was constantly being torn between which path I wanted to take. There are those athletes who go all in on calisthenics skills, getting super advanced at freestyle calisthenics, which is basically the rebellious sibling to gymnastics, building elite strength with static holds like planches and front levers, and learning all the dynamic skills like giants and bar tricks. Then you've got street lifters who are the bodyweight version of powerlifters, focused purely on getting the heaviest weighted dips, pull-ups, muscle-ups, and back squats. And then you've got the guys and girls who just seem to spend all their time just taking their basics like pull-ups and push-ups to higher and higher levels like one-arm pull-ups, super explosive muscle-ups, and crazy deep handstand push-ups. All of these calisthenics approaches end up producing super aesthetic, well-balanced physiques because of one unique advantage that calisthenics training has that anyone can take advantage of, which you can read more about by following the link in the description. The problem I had is I felt like if I wanted to be really good at any of these things, I had to completely give up on the others. I found bar tricks so fun to try and planches so good to look at, but I wanted to train legs too. I find the easily measurable progress of progressing at weighted dips, chin-ups, and squats super satisfying because you have such fine control over the loads that you're using and can really tweak your programming to build to your biggest 1 rep max possible. But I'd never train to compete because if I had to base all my training for the rest of my days just around these exercises, I'd be bored to death within 6 months. Getting awesome at these high level versions of basic pull and push movements is honestly one of the main things that attracted me to calisthenics in the first place. But as you start moving on to one-arm pull-ups and handstand push-up variations, the movements suddenly start to become a lot less stable, meaning it's harder to actually push the working muscles closer to actual muscular failure before your balance or technique breaks down, which makes it harder to continue building muscle as you progress. All this choice is what makes calisthenics so amazing as a sport, but so many people end up either stuck on one of these corners of the sport, or they end up letting their training get pulled in so many different directions that over time, they end up hardly progressing at any of them. For me, I decided that I wasn't going to settle for completely missing out on any of these. Luckily, with my human movement and physiology background and thousands of hours digesting every bit of strength training and bodybuilding research I could get my hands on, I was able to come up with a training style that has gotten me to hitting almost every long-term goal I ever had in those first few years, even though they weren't specific to any one branch of calisthenics, and this was all while I was stacking on 14 kilos of lean muscle. There's 4 fundamental principles that guide this training style. Cycling. That's right, at least 30 minutes a day on a bike. No, I'm just kidding. What I mean is cycling between different main focuses with each program that you do. A huge part of strength development is not in muscle size or power, but in your brain and your nervous system learning how to execute a specific movement and activate your muscles efficiently with perfect coordination. This element of strength doesn't come from more muscle, it comes from practice and more practice. If you try to stuff every single exercise and skill you can into every program, you don't end up with enough regular practice of any single movement to really progress well at it. So to make real gains, you have to pick only 1 or 2 push and pull movements to focus on at any one time, train them 2 to 3 days a week for at least 8 weeks straight to make sure that you have time to get your coordination dialed in and then effectively build the muscles used in those movements. But Jake, won't I just lose all that skill I just practiced when I swap to something else? That's why principle number 2 is maintenance. One of the most exciting findings from strength training research in the last 5 years is one that actually doesn't get talked about that much, but it's a game changer for this training approach. You can actually maintain muscle with anywhere from 1/3 to 1/9 of the work that it takes to gain muscle. This means if it takes you about 6 to 10 sets a week to make gains, you should be able to maintain that comfortably with 1 to 3 sets per week. As I said before, one of the biggest components of strength comes from practice, so how many sets it takes to maintain strength rather than just muscle is going to be a little bit more dependent on the coordination demands of the movement. For example, a handstand push-up will probably take more practice to maintain than a weighted pull-up because it takes more balance and skill. I find that if I keep up just 1 or 2 sets a week of movements that aren't my main focus for that program, myself and my coaching clients can easily maintain our gains and still sometimes even make progress if the main exercises that we're training have some decent carryover. You want these to be either late in your workouts or even on your recovery days so that they don't interfere with your primary goals in that part of your program. This can help you avoid undertraining any muscle groups as well by reducing the chance that you get a whole training period without using some muscles while you're so focused on your main movements, which is what leads me into principle number 3. Understand some biomechanics. If you're wanting your training to build a lot of muscle and give you strength that's actually transferable to a lot of different movements and skills, you have to have some idea of what movements train not only which muscles, but also which parts of muscles. A pull-up trains lats and biceps, but it actually trains different parts of the lats to something like a front lever or a row, and different parts of the biceps to an exercise like a pelican curl. When you end up over or under training parts of muscles for a long time, it makes your muscle growth hit a bottleneck where the whole muscle struggles to keep developing because of its weakest links. This also means that the strength you gain is only really specific to the ranges and movements that you trained in, because outside of those, the other muscles or parts of your muscles that have fallen behind can't keep up with these stronger sections. This is one of the reasons that bodybuilders have so many different types of exercises that they use for each muscle to make sure that every part is growing together, and why even powerlifters who are only really focused on bench, squats and deads competitively include a lot of accessory exercises to target these areas that aren't hit otherwise. In my training right now, I'm focused on building towards a 1 rep max chin up 8 weeks from now, so while I'm doing a lot of sets of chin ups, I'm making sure that my accessory bicep work is all in the lengthened position that doesn't get targeted by them, and in my next program, I'll likely shift the focus of my pull exercises more to muscle ups and front levers to target different parts of the back and elbows and make sure that they don't fall behind after pushing 3 months out with so many chin ups. This is one valuable lesson to take from more established and researched strength sports like bodybuilding and powerlifting, and it actually gets us to our fourth and final principle. Know how to mix strength style training with bodybuilding style training. There's a big crossover here, but these are actually quite different. You do need muscle to generate strength, but if that's all there was to it, bodybuilders would just be the strongest at everything. Conversely, there's no such thing as a successful powerlifter who isn't also jacked. My goal is to have both, and when there's obviously such a crossover, we really can train to be good at both if you use both styles properly. Building maximum muscle is done best with exercises that don't target too many muscles at once, take your muscle through a relatively full range of motion, and that you can safely push close or all the way to failure. There's a problem with this approach that doesn't suit strength style training, and I've actually already said it. To get really strong at a movement, we need lots of practice at doing that movement. Pushing close to failure with heavy, difficult exercises regularly isn't always safe and can teach you bad technique, especially if the movement is already technically demanding, like a handstand push-up or a muscle-up. Those last couple of reps before failure in a set are actually really fatiguing for your muscles and your nervous system as well, meaning that when you keep pushing your sets to failure, you end up burning out fast, meaning you end up reducing the number of sets and reps that you can do effectively, which means less practice at those movements that you want to get stronger at. This is actually a good approach if we're just trying to build muscle, because it means we get the most growth from each set possible with no extra time or work needed, and this is what I actually do for most exercises that aren't the main strength movement of that program. These main goal movements though are best approached differently, more like how powerlifters do. You want the sets to be hard, 5 reps or less, because we're trying to get as much practice executing and controlling heavy reps as we can. The trick is we want these sets to almost never be to failure, except for maybe your last set, and we want to do these exercises always first in the workout when you're fresh. This is all to manage fatigue properly so that we can fit in a couple of extra sets of clean, effective reps without burning out too quick every workout. Even though you might not feel like you're going as hard as you can every set, over the course of a program or a year, doing this well can mean hundreds of extra reps of more challenging, heavy skills and movements, which is all the more practice you need to develop that strength. Again, all this flexibility in goals and approaches is one of the most fun things about bodyweight training, because not only is it a topless mountain to climb, all this variation means there's more than one mountain, and if you know how to implement all these principles well, you can actually climb all of them at once and even jump between them as you please. It's been the best way for me to constantly keep my training interesting and motivating and never feel like I'm missing out on anything. I design all my online programs with these principles in mind, but if you really want to get your training tuned exactly to your goals, no matter which paths you choose, that's where my one-on-one coaching really takes clients to the next level. Using your recovery days intelligently is key to successfully fitting in as much effective training as possible, and if you want to see what that looks like, click here.